Claude artifacts came out, that was the first time that I could have a full feedback loop with the LLM. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. Like, for the first time, I was like, whoa, I can be much more effective. We were doing things instantly for users and making it really easy, but people were kind of like, I don't know if I trust it. And so we actually speed bumped the onboarding and we had them do a little bit of work. There's a little more psychological buy-in, where they're like, oh, I did this. This isn't just AI. I told her the round was closed. He was really just like, let's talk tomorrow. Give me 24 hours. I want to put something together. And sure enough, she called the next day, Saturday. I was actually playing pickleball. And
I bet you came back to that pickleball game just like...
I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate on anything.
Welcome back to Funded, a show taking you behind the scenes of the startup fundraising process. Today's guest is Keil, co-founder of Dreambase, and his experience raising a seed round is, I think, a preview of what fundraising is going to look like for most startups in the near future. We've seen the first wave of AI-native app startups being launched over the past few years. These companies have embedded AI in how they build, how they ship, and how they think about team structure and capital deployment. And for these companies, the fundraising process looks completely different than it did even 2 or 3 years ago. The timelines are compressed, the teams are smaller, prototypes show up before the pitch decks do, and investors are having to recalibrate what traction even means when a 2-person team can put a working product in front of real users in under a week. Dreambase is building what Andy calls the operating center for your company's data, analytics and business intelligence designed so anyone on your team can understand what's happening in the business without needing a data team or knowing SQL. They are building within the Supabase ecosystem and recently closed a $3.7 million seed round led by Supabase's main investor, Felicis. What makes this conversation so interesting isn't just the fundraising outcome, it's the process that led to it. Andy and his co-founder Keil iterated rapidly through 3 early versions of Dreambase, and their current product went from concept to working prototype in just 5 days. The kind of speed changes the nature of conversations you can have with investors. It also changes how you talk about the use of funds when you don't need a 15-person engineering team to ship your product. Finally, it changes what your product roadmap should look like when building capacity no longer serves as a bottleneck. Andy and I had a really good chat about why the key product skill is now deciding what not to build. Andy is navigating all these dynamics in real time, and I think a lot of the questions he's wrestling with are the same questions that more and more founders are going to be facing over the next few years. To wrap, we got into some of the tactical details of how he closed his round, including how the key turning point came one Saturday morning on a pickleball court, fittingly. We talk about why Andy led with a Notion memo instead of a pitch deck, how he used recorded customer conversations as social proof, and a counterintuitive product lesson about what happened when Dreambase made onboarding a little too frictionless. There was a ton of signal in this conversation, and I'm really excited to share it with y'all. Let's get into it. Yeah, well, thank you for taking some time to chat with me today. I'm excited to hear about your experiences fundraising for Dreambase and your approach for company building as an AI native startup in 2026.
Yeah, I love it. Excited to be here. Let's dig in.
All right, well, start off by telling us a little bit about Dreambase's mission and what you're building in pursuit of that mission.
Yeah, so at Dreambase, we really want to make the database the operating center or the control center for your company. Make it really easy for early stage AI native founders to get all of their data in one place without a sprawling data stack. Start operating with a full data team from day one.
And why is 2026 the right year for companies to make this shift? Or what do you think Dreambase will enable that previous data lake, data warehouse companies just weren't able to crack?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, we started to see the efficiencies of ChatGPT and Claude, and you can start to do stuff in those frontier models. But when the shift to like agents started to happen, and they weren't good initially, but they got really good in 2025, and especially now we see Claudebot. There's some reasons not to use Claudebot right now, but I think we're starting to see this big agentic wave where you're going to start feeling like you're hiring digital employees, like you're bringing on members of the team, you're naming them, you're doing a lot of things that weren't really possible before, I think, the end of last year, really. And there was plenty of forward thinkers and early innovators that were starting to play around and do that stuff, but now it's so much more accessible. And we see that with the like explosion of Claude bots. So I think where it really relates to Dreambase and what we're doing, where, I think if you squint or if we started 5 years ago, we would have been an AI enabled BI tool. But we don't even really use BI as nomenclature at all. This is really just getting at like, how do you get an easy dashboard or visibility into the data across your business, whether it's the top of the funnel marketing into the actual like go-to-market stack, the revenue into the product analytics and the actual data of users using your product. When you can start to easily connect those dots, you can start to derive insights so much faster. I think us as a company, it's really easy for us to see where customers are having success in the product or not having success. And we don't have to hop between a bunch of different tools. We're literally building Dreambase for ourselves to run Dreambase, which is really fun. And I don't think this would have been possible even in 2024.
Yeah. I'm going to resist the urge to take us down the Claude bot rabbit hole, at least for right now. Maybe we'll come back to it later. But it's interesting that you bring up BI, because I feel like
bad word. I wasn't supposed to say that.
Well, yeah, I think that was a very popular phrase, say in the late 2010s.
Yeah.
And there was this whole concept of being data driven and how data is like such an important thing for companies to be able to harness. But it seems like doing retrospectives of like that time period, that BI may have actually not produced a lot of like meaningful outcomes for companies. But I do think that like in this new era, when we can analyze data in these new ways, that we could sort of like fulfill the promise of BI, but just with these new approaches. And so that was a long-winded way of asking, like, how do you think that AI can enable this new form of like getting intelligence out of your data?
That's an excellent question. And I skipped right over, I led with agents and skipped over like the really important piece, and that is the contextual layer. Like, how do you build context around the business and really understand what's going on, what revenue means, where's revenue stored, where's the data coming from? And when marketing says revenue and sales says revenue and the executive team says revenue, making sure that that is consistent across the board. It's been very hard in companies. I've been running product for 10 years. And I think the hardest thing has often been connecting each of those systems together without investing heavily in the analytics platforms, click tracking, behavior analytics, Amplitude. You dump all that into an expensive data warehouse. You hire a data team to sit on top of it and run complex ETL processes. And you pay for the expensive BI tool to sit on top. And you have a kind of a gate-kept process of one person or a team of people that filter in all the requests, especially in board meeting time, where you have every executive competing for their attention to just get answers in analysis out. And that I've fought that kind of my entire career. And the beauty of AI is, and especially as context windows have gotten much larger, is you can kind of point at things. We have our contextual layer. We use topics and make it really easy to say, here's how all of these different pieces of context fit together. And once you kind of create those building blocks, then it's so simple to just in natural language say, hey, show me the customers who have made the most revenue in the last 90 days. And they pop right up. And I think a piece that we're still building and actively excited about at Dreambase is like getting the data. And I think the failure of BI it was so painful just to get the data in front of you. Then you're like, okay, cool. What does all this data mean? Now we have to spend a bunch of energy understanding what the chart's going up and down or like not moving, being flat. Like, how do we interpret the data?
Yeah.
And this is where the pattern spotting of AI is really compelling. And you can, in relative short order, once you put in the legwork up front, you can just say, what's going on in the last 7 days? Or like, what happened last week? And so that's the part that we get excited about. We call it the so what. Like, It's great that you have a dashboard and you can log in and you can look at it, or we can email it to you or post it to Slack. But when we add the insights layer on top and we say, hey, this thing changed, you should look at it. What are the anomalies, anomaly detection? There's a lot of really compelling places that you can take it, and then not just letting the human in the loop know what's going on, but start to anticipate what to do next.
Yeah.
If you, for instance, understand the code and the full feature set. So there's a lot of power in what is possible with AI right now. I think the hardest part is knowing where to focus and what to build. Like when you can build anything, it's really hard to decide what order of priority to build it.
Yeah. I love the concept of like democratizing the access to data and letting anyone at the company kind of explore the data in whatever way they want to. And obviously you can still set up like rails and like set processes for creating reports using AI agents, but like making it less rigid, I think will make the data that much more valuable. And like that contextual, that so what is such an important missing piece as well. Like Air CFO has a whole gallery of like really nice dashboards that we probably look at like once a month, if that. And I'm sure that most companies share that same experience. And so, yeah. But on your last point, the important thing is figuring out what to build. I know that's a problem that Dreambase is helping to solve, and that's a problem that y'all have grappled with yourselves over the last couple of years of getting Dreambase off the ground. And
yeah,
so I know that you built a couple of different versions of the Dreambase product before you landed on your current iteration.
Our favorite iteration.
Their favorite one. I'm sure they've gotten better and better each time. And how? So I'm just curious, what did that process look like for you, and how was it different than your previous experiences building products like pre-AI?
Yeah, great question. And I think there's a number of directions we can go from here, because it really like leads into the fundraise itself. But I think my co-founder and I, he was working at a company called Credo AI, was very early adopter of all the new Gen AI stuff. And I tend to be like a little bit later of an adopter. I let some other people like feel it out. I pay attention to it. I'm excited about it, but I don't always invest my energy first. And he was really good at just kind of pulling me along and kind of pounding the table and saying like, hey, I don't think you know how good AI is. Like, jump in, try it out. Long story short, Claude Artifacts came out. That was the first time that I could have a full feedback loop with the LLM. I built like 3 little micro apps in an afternoon at a coffee shop, and it just really broke my brain. This is the first time that, I've always had to interface with code or building product through an engineer, through a designer. And I still get goosebumps thinking about it. Like, for the first time, I was like, holy shit, I don't know if I can cuss on here, but it was like, whoa, I can be much more effective in this like early stage 0 to 1, go put something in front of customers. And so we kind of both left where we were working at the time as a head of product at a company called QuotaPath. I had a deep affinity for revenue operations and understanding all the moving pieces within later stage companies, since those were our primary customers. And I think we got most compelled and excited about the new way of building. What does an AI native company even mean? Like, how many people do you need to build an MVP or go 0 to 1 when 2 of you can do it seemingly? I mean, it wasn't overnight in the early days. There was still a lot of prompt engineering and all this stuff that you had to do to make it easy. There's now a bunch of guardrails that make it much faster. But seeing that for the first time, and I think some people are still like getting to this now. We're seeing a bunch of our friends that are like talking about Clawbot, not to bring up Clawbot again, but like they're seeing these things now that even more guardrails have been in place, and it's easy, more accessible. It's like, okay, cool. Like my aunt will be like, oh my gosh, like look at this thing that I just did. Mm-hmm. And I would have never expected that. So we got really compelled on how fast it is to build. We had been toying around with the idea of starting a company. We were like, man, we really should do something. I mean, I've known Keil, my co-founder, for over 15 years, basically. We met on Twitter. It's crazy. And we were like, this is the spark. This is the moment. We weren't really thinking about like, I don't know, the .com. I wasn't really a part of all that. I didn't see it, but hearing other people say that it felt really compelling. So we left. It was a no-brainer to like full stop, quit our jobs and start a company. What we were going to do, we were like, I don't quite know yet, but we're going to figure it out. And we're not going to figure it out inside somebody else's company or take up somebody else's time.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe something that's interesting. We don't need to talk about it now, but there's a lot of people that it's like really easy to spin up side projects and right now, and it's like easy to have these side businesses. But for us, we're like, no, it's time for us. Like, we want to start a company. And the first thing that we did was very heavily anchored in the revenue operations side of things. The like everything is possible. You can build anything. I kind of joke that we built Lovable before Lovable.
Yeah, I remember that actually.
Yeah, we had, and I think we still have videos online that show the early iterations of this, and it was just wild what was possible so early on. And so we focused on revenue operations teams and making it easy for them to connect their different data sets and bring applications to life. That ended up being a little bit more of a like end-to-end problem and feeling more like a services business. But we still built Dream 1.0, and then Lovable came out and we're like, oh, we got to play bigger. We built Dream 2.0, which is really more tools, more agents, more collaboration in the workspace. And it was just untenable. Everybody had a different set of integrations that they wanted to use. They wanted a little bit different feature set. And so the pattern matching just wasn't quite working. Which brings us to like why we got excited about Dreambase is everything that we built for the past 3 or 4 years, even like little dumb side projects, ended up being on Supabase. We're like, well, there's something here. And this is also where we were realizing that Lovable put Supabase like front and center in their application. Bolt put Supabase front and center. V0 made it really easy to connect to Supabase. And they just started growing like a rocket ship. And we basically tripled down. And the idea that people building now are going to build generational companies, they're very likely to be, I won't even bring up the V word, but they will be built by people who may not have been builders in past lives.
It's like the V word. Oh.
Trying to move away from that as much as possible.
I don't like that term either. Yeah, I think that it does whatever is happening a disservice. Although I think the connotation is shifting a little bit. Like vibe coding isn't as looked down upon as it was like a year ago.
Yeah.
But still, it doesn't quite encompass what's really like where we're going with this. Like at a certain point, it's not vibe coding anymore. It's just a new system for.
It's a new way to build. Yeah, it's like we call it the new AI native stack for all intents and purposes. So I'm like spending more time on this, but I am so compelled by the new tool set and what's possible and how fast you can build. Supabase has just had incredible growth. They, I think, are over like 6 million developers at this point, and just not showing any signs of slowing down soon. And so like when you think about how fast it is to build, and like I think about the complexity and the annoyance of like not getting good access to data until like a series A or a series B, like that's crazy. Like nobody should have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars between software and people to understand if what they built or their business is working.
Totally. I'd love to get into the relationship with Supabase and how that played into your fundraise journey. But first, let's try something. So could you give me like a quick kind of before and after comparison of what your end-to-end like product development lifecycle would have looked like before using AI versus what the process that you've developed building Dreambase with Keil?
Yeah,
like
kind of
breaking it down for like non-product people. Like
yeah, funny. It's like I just have like nightmares right now. But it like in the previous world, so like in a previous role before AI native, I would have spent a bunch of time and energy writing up a product requirements document. I would have had a bunch of customer conversations up front, making sure that I feel on base with what I'm kind of documenting and putting on paper. I would have had I would write up a design brief, have a designer run through and create kind of a wireframe or even maybe like a higher fidelity UI for it, depending on the project. I would have sat down with the engineering lead of an engineering squad and started to walk through the PRD with them, give them a first look of it, walk through the actual design. They would point out what feels hard or like we should maybe think about doing elsewhere. They kind of strip away pieces of the idea that would take too long to build or to ship. We would operate in a 6-week sprint effectively, the shape up cycles. I'm sure some of the audience is familiar with that. And then we would like get to the end and put it in front of customers and like launch and do a marketing launch around it and hope that it worked. And I think the crazy thing, and this is what folks are feeling or so compelled by and excited by with the new AI native process, is we still put in the product thinking and the energy. We still talk to the customers, but we can very rapidly create that product requirement stock, and then you can hand it off to Claude Code and a series of prompts to make the PRD better, or just like build out the task and the plan to go build. And we tend to do that. What Keil and I really enjoy doing is what we call a bake-off, which is we, especially for net new features, we'll come up with an idea, we'll throw it at Lovable, Bolt, and V0 at the same time. Actually, AI Studio, Google's new product, is actually very good. They were terrible in the beginning, and now they've caught up, which is kind of par for the course for Google. I hope they don't kill this product because it's very nice. And we'll kind of look at what comes back and then take the best pieces of each and kind of Frankenstein it together. And then Kyle generally moves into Claude Code. We don't do the bake-off for every single feature, but for the net new ones that are a little bit bigger, we do that. And I think the early gestation of Dreambase, in all honesty, was a 11 p.m. like late night whiteboarding session where we were kind of just like on one, and we were like, what if we just focused on Supabase? And that was kind of the aha moment where not everything got easier, but everything started to fall into focus. And we went from that moment to some early ideation to a tangible product that was in customers' hands in 5 days and existing users' hands in 5 days. And to the point where it looked so real that they were clicking a button that said connect to Supabase and it wouldn't connect. And they were like, hey, I think there's a bug. We're like, oh, no, this is a very early front-end type. And that sort of thing is so compelling as a product person because we've never had access to that before. Even with the best design and engineering teams, there's been multiple stakeholders and you have to align everyone, and kind of that just built-in friction of time just makes the process take longer.
Yeah.
And when you can condense and consolidate that into almost immediate, or just like, as long as you have the max plan and you can just keep going.
Yeah.
It's very fast.
I mean, that sounds like that literally saves tens of hours for each like feature that you would want to put through that product management cycle. And obviously there's big benefits to just like being able to put it into users' hands faster so you can iterate. Like you could probably do 10 iterations in the time that it would take you to do a single iteration in the like pre-AI world. And this is totally like a tangent. But I'm curious to hear, like, what do you think is lost with this AI native process compared to the old way of doing things?
That's a really good question. I think you do miss some of the alignment is good. Like I didn't like having the multiple stakeholders and everybody being aligned and kind of giving the thumbs up on what you're building. That's all awesome. And that needs to continue happening. I think the part that's most compelling is condensing the time frame. But there is an amount of like when you can build anything very fast, and then when AI just like throws some extra functionality or stuff in, I think you have to discern like what's worth adding versus what's worth cutting. And I've always been a fan of simpler is better, like make it simple. I think now you're seeing in a lot of AI products, and I'd be curious to get your take on this, where because you can just keep building, the simple thing doesn't remain simple.
Totally.
And so I feel like we're getting to a point where people are bolting on a bunch of different stuff. And you didn't really have that when time was such a commodity. When it was, well, you didn't add any of the bolt-ons because there was no time to get there. And then you launch and customers love it and they're not asking for any of the bolt-ons. So you don't have to go build it.
Yeah.
And that's something that I try to be mindful of as we're building, because especially as we start to grow the team and we'll have more capacity and we can keep going, I think that's where the what to build and the priority of what to build becomes really important. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that fully answered your question.
No, it definitely does. And I have pretty much constantly had this experience working with Claude Code, where these cutting edge models, it feels like sometimes they just want to like show off, like they want to go above and beyond.
Yes, and
Yeah. And they're like sneaking these things into the product that we hadn't even talked about. And sometimes it's like, you know, it's like a little Easter egg that your little AI coding assistant built for you. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then you just kind of leave it in. But was that feature necessary? Like, absolutely not. And I think it can potentially like dilute the product experience.
Yeah.
Because you really just need to like do one core thing really well with any given product. And like, if you're trying to do 20 things, but then the one core thing kind of gets lost in the shuffle, like that could probably like overall detract from like your product's like full potential.
Yeah. This is an active, and Kyle, if you're watching, we're in active conversations about this. I love you so much. It's still mind blowing how fast it is to build, and these like additional things get added in. And it's so simple is so hard. Like, have you kind of killed any of the like Easter eggs that pop in? Have you like ripped them back out?
No, but I'm thinking about
It's
how
painful.
that should be
It's
like,
painful,
yeah,
because you're like customers like, oh, that's kind of cool, and they're like, oh, should we keep it? And you drag enough of those along, and they're like, oh shit, like how, like where's the real signal? What is the actual? And this is where, you know, like product thinking and UX thinking and the original skill sets of the before times are still relevant. So relevant, even more relevant now when you have to, you know, look at a fully featured product, and the job is almost more to rip things away than it is to add more. Like we think about this every day, and what are the right ways? Like, we're launching new AI native dashboards later today, which is very fun. You know, we had to make some updates to onboarding, and now onboarding takes just a little bit longer, and we're kind of outside of that sweet spot of 90 days to the, or 90 days, God, not 90 seconds to the aha moment. And every delay before the user gets to go, oh shit, this is awesome, it's hard. And so we're looking at onboarding specifically and saying, how do we focus the user so that they can kind of like fly through this and do only what's necessary? Like, we give them, like right now, they land on a page that's fully functional and everything can be done on one page. That's a little bit overwhelming at the same time.
Yeah.
And so do we want them to focus on building their contextual layer, or do we want to like show them what we know about their Supabase and like all, like, I guess I'll skip that part for now. But I think in AI products, there's also because timing can be so short and everything can be so instant, there's also some trust building that needs to happen in the tools. And what we realized is we were doing things instantly for users and making it really easy. You basically connect Supabase, we grab a bunch of context, and then here's a report. And that was great, but people were kind of like, I don't know if I trust it.
Yeah.
And so we actually speed bumped the onboarding, and we had them do a little bit of work. And with that little bit of work, there's a little more psychological buy-in.
Yeah.
Where they're like, oh, I did this. This isn't just AI. And then we show them that they have control of kind of like crafting this alongside the AI.
Little IKEA effect.
Yeah, exactly. That's so like, we're an Allen wrench. We're an Allen, right?
Yeah. That's good. I like that. And I really think that you hit on something there, which is the role of a product expert shifting from being able to add things on, like moving to a world where the like valuable skill set is being able to strip things out.
Yeah.
Like, I think about what a product expert could do for all of these like people who are building with these tools. And I feel like there's definitely going to be a world where a product person, their job is going to be like looking at a tool that's been built with Claude code and distilling it down, like saying, oh, 80% of this stuff can be like ripped out, and like let's find the essence of the product in here so that your tool can like do that one core thing more effectively. So yeah, that's just like an interesting kind of inversion to the way that product people have traditionally worked, but could be like just where all of this is heading.
Yeah, and it's so Clairvaux actually saw her kind of give this talk originally at the Lenny Summit out in San Francisco, and she's kind of continued beating the drum, and I just it's fun to have talked about it a few years ago and like see it actually happen, where the consolidation of product engineering, design, there's even like some vens of sales and marketing, and that just everything is getting condensed into individuals, or a very small group of individuals. And so I tend to think more along the lines, instead of any of those being kind of an individual persona, is we're all just builders. Like, to be a effective builder in 2026 and beyond, you have to have decent enough product thinking. You have to have some design taste and understanding for UI UX, and you have to know a little bit about engineering and how the pieces fit together behind the scenes to be able to kind of graduate out of that vibe coding, throw some stuff together to really building a company. And those are really that's who we aim to serve with Dreambase. Like, we love the vibe coders and we want everybody to be able to start building a company, but we're dead set focused on people building real businesses on top of this new AI native stack. For Cell, Supabase, Resend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's talk about Dreambase's $3.7 million seed round. Talk me through how that round came together from start to finish. How long did it take? How many investors did you speak with? How did you ultimately make your decision around which investor that you wanted to partner up with?
Yeah, we're super excited. I don't think we've talked about this publicly anywhere, maybe in a few social media posts, or people that are paying attention could connect the dots. But the round, we went back out to market end of August, early September. I forget the exact dates. I headed out to San Francisco, set up a handful of conversations ahead of Supabase Select, which was a big conference, Supabase's first conference that they threw at YC. And we basically went a month before, started talking to people, kind of warming up folks that we were excited about, and kind of leveraging the network, so to speak. And had in a failing to raise in 2024, had enough of a network that we could kind of go back to and say, hey, this is different. Here's why it's different. This is compelling. There's a real market here. And we're like tied to Supabase, and Supabase is starting to explode. So like, let's help build an ecosystem around it. Those conversations, people started to really get it and understood that, oh yeah, there's not really the analytics stack for AI native is not yet figured out. There is still kind of a gap there with Supabase and with Postgres as a whole. Somebody needs to solve this in the more AI native way. Nobody was seeing it at that time. The closest parallels that people would point out were like the kind of like WYSIWYG BI tools, where you could go kind of build your own custom dashboards, and we were kind of leaps beyond that. So we went back out at Supabase Select. Well, let me actually like step back. We had some local conversations that were compelling, and I think one person that really catalyzed around was Pat Matthews at Active Capital. We were introduced to Pat through Jason Seitz, who used to run Techstars Cloud and very involved with Techstars. I've been a big fan and worked with the Techstars folks for quite a while. And so the intro to Pat, we met with Chris, who's here in Austin. Pat's down in San Antonio a lot of the time. And it was just like very quick conversations. They got it immediately. We sent over like a pretty straightforward deck. I think it was maybe 12 slides. And we sat down at Sawyer and Co, which is one of my favorite places in Austin. And they kind of, they grilled Kyle and I on a handful of things and kind of pushed us in a few places, but ultimately really wanted to kind of be the first check and lead the round. And I don't think, being a first-time founder, I realized what amount of momentum that first check gives you, especially when it's like a decent amount. They wrote a $500K check and then committed to following on in subsequent rounds or valuation caps. For me, that gave us a huge amount of confidence going back out to California for that second trip to Supabase Select. No longer were we, at risk of not having any money to run the business, since we hadn't taken any salary up until that point. And this was, I believe, would have been October. Yeah, I think we got the wire end of September. So we were back out in California for Supabase Select, and it just we timed right place, right time was a lot of it. I think you can hustle is a lot of it, but you got to get lucky too. And Supabase had just raised a massive round. They were at Supabase Select. All the meetings that we set up, we could point at Supabase Select. I guess the piece that I glossed over is that Supabase, the COO and CTO, Rory and Ant, wrote a check in the very early days of Dreambase, and they were in on the lovable for revenue ops idea, which was pretty freaking awesome. It was nice to have their vote of confidence. So kind of back to some earlier questions, when the dots started to get connected, there's another local angel who happens to be the CFO of Supabase. That's pretty influential. He made some connections while we were out in California. One of those was to Viv at Felicis. And it all kind of happened really fast. Viv has a lot of experience in the space and kind of sees the gap. Being so involved with Supabase, also knows where all the growth opportunities are there. And so was a relatively quick conversation to go from, I think it was actually, my conversation with Viv was actually my last conversation before I got on the plane back to Austin. I told her the round was close. We have no more room, and we can talk about numbers if that's compelling. And she was really just like, I think, like, let's talk tomorrow. Give me 24 hours. I want to put something together. And sure enough, she called the next day, Saturday. I was actually playing pickleball and I had to step out, and we kind of talked numbers and got to a good place.
Amazing. I bet you came back to that pickleball game just like
I couldn't focus.
Superhuman strength.
I couldn't concentrate on anything. It was, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you structured your most recent fundraise sprint that resulted in the seed round compared to how you were approaching it your first couple of attempts that were unsuccessful.
Yeah, that's the biggest learning that I had in the process doing this for the first time. I didn't realize how important it was to kind of condense and consolidate the conversations and build some urgency and excitement around it. The first time we tried to raise, I just kind of took meetings as they would come to me, just asking for intros and like taking first meetings, sometimes intros from people who are clearly going to pass, and not really architecting it as much as I did the second time. And then the second time we probably talked to about 50 people in total. A lot of them very warm intros or people we'd already been having conversations with in the past. So it was easy to kind of pick the conversations back up and not start cold. Yeah, I think it really was about showing people the product, getting them to see it, showing them customer traction, and then moving very quickly between the conversations. I think I spent between the first trip to San Francisco and the second trip to San Francisco, for 6 weeks, I was just taking primarily investor conversations and customers and building the customer journey and momentum. And I think this is something if you have an ability to record customer conversations, what I did is I consolidated a bunch of different customers saying nice things about our product, or like the experience that they had with our product. So I could send a follow-up and say, hey, here's actual customer conversations. I think it was maybe like a 2-minute video in total across like 4 or 5 different customers. And really it reinforced the ICP. Hey, here's a relatively new CTO. He's working on 4 different companies, more in an agency style. Here's his experience and purchase journey, and he's going to walk Dreambase in the door to the next 4 companies. Some stuff like that. And then I think this is maybe non-standard for some of the founders, but we mostly raised off of memo in Notion more than a deck. Like we used a very light deck and would send it if people asked for it, not ahead of time, but as a follow-up.
Yeah.
And the memo, I think, ended up doing the job, or a lot of the legwork more than anything, because we can be more comprehensive.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, a PowerPoint deck is a very like lossy medium for transmitting information. VCs probably need a deck to take to their partner meetings, but the memo just gives you it gives you a higher fidelity way to express your philosophy or like your overall vision.
Yeah, it allowed us to add images like Keil and I at Stupabase Select. I think was a pretty fun thing to have. We could embed those videos, just like videos of the product itself. That I think did a lot of the legwork for us as well.
Was there any single bit of advice that you received during the fundraise process that was super impactful for you, besides maybe the way that you structured the timing? And on the flip side, was there advice, and you don't have to name names obviously, but was there any advice that you received that you realized was no longer applicable in 2025 that you had to kind of unlearn?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily the advice that we walked away from that was really stressful for me was some investors asking for a model up front when we're effectively a pre-seed seed company. And I spent a lot of cycles like ruminating on that and like spending a bunch of time on it. And then I think this is where the trip out to San Francisco the first time was really interesting and eye-opening for me, because it became a lot less about the financials and what the actual model is right now at this moment in time. And it was much more about the roadmap and the market and where we wanted to take the product and how many people we needed to get there. And the conversation became a lot less about the 2 million number that we were raising at, and folks are telling us to raise 4. And that for me was really, it kind of broke my brain. I grew up like relatively poor from the Midwest. And so like this amount of money is a lot of money. And I'm not quite used, I'm still not used to it. And it like to hear someone say like, oh, you should raise more money was kind of wild to me. But in shifting into that mindset and asking for more, the conversations became much easier, because it's, I think some of there is a real compulsion to go as fast as possible right now because it's so easy to build. And you're seeing all these companies get to like crazy revenue numbers super fast. I think a lot of folks are kind of caught between how much capital to deploy, how fast, and do you jump straight from like pre-seed to A, or like what is the middle ground? How much do you need to get there? How big of a team do you need? Old way is you hire 10 engineers and you burn a bunch of money getting to your product, and then you launch the product. And I think now it's kind of like, well, maybe we only need 4 engineers to get to like meaningful revenue.
Yeah. Actually, in this very room, I had a conversation with my friend Henry, who's the CEO of Verisol.
Oh yeah.
Well, shout out Henry. And he made a very similar point, which I thought was super wise. He's talking about how as a seed stage founder, you need to paint this massive vision for what the company can become. Like the investors are taking a bet on you having the potential to turn into a $1 billion+ company someday. And some first-time founders may think that it will be easier for them to raise a smaller amount of money because the ask is smaller. But really, when you're asking for less money, it is potentially harming your credibility because the investor's sitting there thinking like, how are you going to become a generational company with this amount of capital? And so his advice was that you should aim much bigger, and it's actually easier to get a larger amount of money at the early stages than to get a smaller amount.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially on the vision piece, I think, it was never said explicitly, but the smaller check sizes and the smaller valuation caps were much more focused on like, okay, just a small amount, and then you raise more after you get to like one small milestone. And I think it's much more compelling to set a vision for a really big milestone out of the gate and not have to think about raising multiple times. And so I think that is maybe a little bit of a difference between Austin or a lot of Texas capital and SF capital. They'd rather you take the bigger swing, and maybe even New York, take the bigger swing now. And if it doesn't work, like, damn it. But take the big swing, and let's not be in this kind of gray area of like constantly having to raise money or raise money to do the next thing. If it's not big enough.
You and Keil would probably both characterize yourselves as builders, but you don't have technical backgrounds in the traditional sense. So you both have this product design expertise. And so as a pair of non-technical co-founders sitting down with investors, how did you pitch your dynamics and your skill sets as a strength as opposed to something that was going to hold you back as you were getting Dreambase off the ground?
Yeah, great question. And I got to give Keil a ton of credit because he's always been an engineering focused designer. He's always been building while designing. I think that's one of his superpowers, and I was so excited to be able to co-found with him. But at the same time, not a old world CTO necessarily. So I think the way that we made up for that largely in the fundraise was building the product. We kind of were like, put up or shut up. You can see the product. Here's what we've built so far. We've got a great set of like technical advisors and other deep tech engineers that know and will look at and kind of help us down the path. And I think one of the more compelling things for us is every time we kind of like come up with a really hard problem and then Keil would solve it, we'd come back to them and be like, can you guys give this a look? And they'd always be like, holy, that works. Like that's great. That's a great way to architect that. And I think we, through building together for several years before we landed on Dreambase, like he just kept building that muscle and that repetition and understanding a bit more of the technical side. And so I think back to your question in the fundraise is that it came up a couple of times, but not really at all, given the depth of the product and the fact that we had customers and a modest amount of revenue. It made it a lot easier.
Yeah, I guess the proof is in like handing them the product and having them experience it and having them talk to customers who have experienced it. And there's no denying that you built something that works and solves a problem, regardless of like how many years of experience, like actually writing code by hand have you had?
Yeah. And I think one of my favorite anecdotes of the fundraise was Bill over at First Mile, and he we had a great initial conversation, and he was just like, I'm just gonna jump in and check it out. And we've got a bunch of Slack notifications set up, and Keil and I were kind of like, yeah, okay. I doubt it, because not really anybody else is even signing up for the product. And it was so cool. He went out, found a data set, moved it into Supabase, created an account, signed up for Dreambase, and in 90 seconds, like, created his first report. And he was like, oh, I get it. And from there, that made the conversation so easy.
Yeah.
And that again, that's kind of what I mean by the product was real. Like, we weren't just a slide deck of what we were going to do. We weren't just like a clickable prototype in Figma. It was a usable, tangible product.
Yeah. That's a really interesting dynamic that I've noticed from conversations with founders through this series is I think there is definitely a shifting like back and forth that happens between founders and investors these days, where there's like an expectation that investors are actually going to roll up their sleeves and like try out the product because the product is there, it's tangible, like you can touch it, like it's not just a slide deck, but also because there's not really any excuse for investors to not be able to like try out these tools. Because in a lot of cases, like, I mean, you can like close a knowledge gap around a product very easily. And so I've talked to a bunch of founders of like back office tech tools, and they like use their product within their fundraising process. Yeah. And in similar way, I've heard from investors like that they feel like they need to be trying out every single product that they're considering investing in, which I think is probably, it wasn't the case a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, you think that, like, did you get like product feedback from investors during the fundraising process?
Yeah, less so. I don't think anybody was giving like directives of like, you need to change this or try this. It was a lot more like thinking at a higher level of like, oh, I can see where this is going to go. When are you, like, you're on Supabase now? Are you thinking about all of Postgres? We are. Like where's the product going from here? Because clearly it was just the two of us. That's part of the fundraise. We need capital to go higher, build out more of the roadmap and what we were thinking. And so I think it fueled roadmap conversations and what the go-to-market starts to look like more than it was like direct product feedback.
Yeah. How did being an AI native company change the way that you thought about your use of funds for your seed round? There's a pretty well established playbook for kind of like how you would put seed capital to work back in the late 2010s, early 2020s. But I feel like that's all kind of been thrown out the window now. So with you and Keil having this almost $4 million in the bank, like, how did you think about putting that money to work?
Yeah, great question. It's still people, it's still building, but I think it's a little bit more calculated. And I mean, I'm also older in my career, so product market fit is a real thing. And I like being pulled into growth more than just like hiring a bunch of people and building a bunch of stuff and then hoping it works. I've seen that fail plenty of times. Just in terms of company growth, like it's much different. I think we have more money in the bank that gives us a little bit more freedom to kind of decide where we deploy. And we're looking for early signs of product market fit and being kind of pulled into growth. And we're seeing early signals with the new AI native dashboards of folks converting at a relatively high rate. Like we have our last cohort was like a 12.5% conversion to paid of our free trial, which feels really good. I want to see that for another consecutive couple of months. And then we're gonna, like right now, we're seeding with those early customers the different directions we can go on the roadmap. And then we'll invest in each of those. And the way that we'll invest is likely several team members kind of, I would say more like in pods. But we don't need to, I mean, I came from running engineering teams of like 5 or 6 on a squad with a product manager and a designer. And so the difference now from the prior playbooks is we will probably be like 1 or 2 people for each major part of the roadmap, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It is still people. A lot of it is like the AI tooling to prevent us from needing people.
Yeah.
Especially on like the marketing and some of the sales side. Like I think their AI native CRMs are pretty interesting right now. Like how much of that do you start to hand off the tooling? But yeah, I think the goal right now in pre-seed is to get us to that explosive product market fit. And then we'll probably still hire sales. I just don't know how fast.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about like how that pie is going to be sliced up in the future. And we don't really know yet because companies are kind of figuring out what that new playbook should be. But it sounds like the pods are going to be much more tight knit than they were previously, and you're going to be hiring more like builders.
Yeah, and I guess the unsaid piece of this is also super senior engineers. I feel bad for the juniors right now, but there's just not time to necessarily do as much coaching as I would have done prior and kind of build that on-ramp and talent pipeline. But when you don't need as many people and you need people to have kind of command and authority and autonomy over their pod or their section of the roadmap, it's really, I think that is something that is really hard right now with building in an AI native manner and with AI tools, is keeping entire teams on the same page when you're going so fast. It's that's really difficult.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on time here. This has been a really awesome conversation. Do you have any other advice for a first-time founder, especially one maybe building in an AI native space, that will help them increase their chances of successfully raising their first round of funding?
Get a co-founder. I know there's a lot of hype around solo founders, and I think that can certainly be compelling, but it gets very lonely. There's a lot of hard decisions. There's a lot of hard work and effort, and there's the highs and lows. And I really can't imagine doing it without Keil. I think that I probably would have been excited about being a solo founder when I was in my 20s and thought I knew it all, but it's really nice to be in the trenches with someone else and have someone to lean on and kind of share on the shit.
Yeah, that's great advice. Building a startup is really hard. And I know that people have talked a lot about, there's going to be a single person company that grows to $1 billion valuation or whatever. And while that might technically be possible, I feel like that sounds absolutely horrible.
That's awful.
Like, I don't know who is going to do that, but I feel like I would not want to be that person.
Yeah, no thank
you. So I don't think that's the future that we are heading towards in any meaningful way, because it really does help when you are getting a startup off the ground to have some other humans in the war room with you to help you kind of like ride out those ups and downs.
Yeah, I think the common phrase is like everything changes when you can't all fit in one car, or you can't all just like go to the bar, grab some pizza. I'm big fan of teams in general. I just don't think they need to be as large as they used to.
Yeah, a lot is changing for sure. Well, Andy, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today.
Of course.
I'm a big fan of what you and Keil are building at Dreambase and looking forward to following along with the journey. Anything that you want to plug while we're wrapping up here?
Oh man, if you're building on Supabase, dreambase.com, check us out.
AI native dashboards.
AI native dashboards.
Love it. All right. Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course.